Chess YouTube, what is happening? Now, as you all know, Magnus Carlsen plays pretty much every opening as white these days. He plays the Italian Opening, the Roy Lopez Opening, the Queen's Gambit, the English Opening, and on and on and on. But one of his absolute favorite openings these days as white has got to be the Catalan Opening. Now, the Catalan occurs after the moves typically 1d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, and finally the key Catalan move, g3. Now with this move right here, white's idea is so simple. He wants to go bishop g2, short castles, and then exert so much pressure on this long diagonal with the bishop throughout the entire game. And the setup is very simple, but it's such a strong opening. And the way Magnus Carlsen plays this opening, he makes it look so easy. So with that in mind, today's video, we're having a look at one of his latest games in this opening from last week's Titled Tuesday tournament. And this game should show you why, if you're trying to find a good opening as white, a good go-to, just solid opening to press for a win, this might be the opening you need. So with that in mind, let's dive right into this game. In the game, white did not open 1d4. Instead, he opened actually 1c4 here. But don't worry, we do reach the Catalan all the same. We have c4, e6, g3, d5, and from there, bishop g2, knight f6, knight f3, bishop e7, castles, and finally d4. So we do have a Catalan on the board, even though we started with 1c4. The Catalan can be reached if we have many move orders. Now from here, black has maybe one main move, d takes c4. It's the move that most players play at the highest level, but instead, black in this game played the move c5, which does transpose to more of a Tarrasch opening, but don't worry about it. White's setup here is still effectively the same. It's still basically a Catalan opening for white. So now we have all this tension here in the center. The D pawns and C pawns are both attacking each other, and Magnus here, he simply liquidates the center. First of all, he takes on C5. We have D takes C5, bishop takes, and then C takes and E takes. So now in this position, black has the isolated D pawn. White's entire plan right now is to pressure that pawn with his pieces and so on, and simply try to prove that the pawn is weak and his bishop on G2 is simply too strong for black to handle. Now here, white has several different ways to proceed. One idea is to go at some point bishop G5. For example, knight to C3, and then knight c6, and bishop g5, which is a very solid idea, pressuring the knight, pinning the knight to the queen on d8, and therefore pressuring d5 with the queen. Now, the other idea that you can also do, and the one Magnus played in this game here, is very strong. It's the move a3. Now, with this move, the idea is simple. You want to go b4, gaining space in the queen side, driving back this bishop, and then you want to go bishop b2 with two fianchetto bishops, both exerting a ton of pressure on these long diagonals. And from there, you have a very simple, very easy setup, but actually, it's pretty hard for black to defend, and Magnus, he shows just how strong the plan is in this game. From here, black has many ideas. The computer loves the idea. It's a very fancy maneuver of first knight to e4, jumping in with the knight. Then if b4, bishop e7, and if bishop b2, bishop to f6. A very strange idea to try and neutralize this piece. Now, instead of that, in the game, black here plays the move knight to c6, a very logical, natural idea. By far, the best square for that piece. But Magnus, he just goes as planned. b4, pushing back the bishop. Black, bishop b6. But, of course, the other squares, d6 and e7, are also playable for black. So, d6, e7, also playable in the game. Bishop b6 was chosen. Now, from here, Magnus, knight c3, h6, and then bishop b2. So far, so good. Magnus getting simply very good squares for all of his pieces, and it's very instructive. He's getting every single piece out to good squares before he goes on the offensive. I see a lot of players, they try to attack right away out of the opening, but Magnus here getting every single piece to a fantastic square before attacking. It's very instructive. All right, black here. Rook to e8 is the move. Eyeing the weak e2 pawn with the rook, which is a very relevant idea in this opening in general. And white, he ignores the attack and simply goes rook to c1, getting yet another piece out into the game. The rook now eyes the open c file. It is by far the best square for the rook right now in this position. All right, black. Grandmaster Akobian, he plays bishop g4, flying out with the bishop. A decent move, but Magnus, he ignores the attack on that knight. It's not that big of a deal, and instead plays the move here, knight to a4. A very strong move, and finally Magnus here on move 14 begins to go on the offensive. Up until now, every single move, the knight, the bishop, castling, developing these pieces here, the knight and bishop and rook. Everything so far is simply him mobilizing his army, and finally he's ready to apply pressure on the opponent into enemy territory. So knight to a4, a strong multi-purpose idea. Now this move has several different ideas. First of all, obviously you pressure the bishop, and if that bishop falls, white's going to have those two Bs, and that will be a massive asset in this game. Now beyond that, what also pressures the knight on f6. For example, the threat now, if black wastes a move like, I don't know, rook to c8, white here could trade on f6 with the bishop, and the problem there for black is, how do you take back? If you take back with the queen, d5 falls like that. On the other hand, if you take back with the pawn, g takes, then your pawn structure here is just ruined forever, and that's obviously not a good idea for black either. So black here faced a very difficult choice. What do you do about the pressure on f6 and the pressure on b6 here? Honestly, it's very hard to find the right move here as black on move 14. It's only move 14, and black already in a tremendous amount of pressure, and it's not like white did anything fancy in this game. White just played natural developing moves, and in the Catalan, this often happens where you just play natural ideas, natural moves, and the pressure just builds and builds and builds. All right, black here. He actually plays the move here, rook to c8. Now, the problem with, for example, bishop c7, again, is you can't just capture on f6 and black's under a world of pressure. So instead, rook to c8 played in the game, a natural move here for black. But Magnus, he simply captures on b6. We have knight takes, and black here, a takes, and then h3, bishop h5, and finally, bishop takes f6. And again, the key idea, black here, he has a very hard time finding a good recapture. The queen takes recapture, loses d5, and the g takes recapture. I mean, the pawn structure there on the king side is just ruined. So what do you do here as black? In the game, black here does take with the queen. We have queen takes f6, and now queen takes d5. And already on move 18, Magnus here, he's up a pawn. He has the better pawn structure, maybe even the better pieces in general. And the pressure is just only beginning to build. I mean, we're going to see Magnus in the game just apply more and more pressure on the opponent. He is just relentless with this opening. Black here, bishop g6 is the move, finding a better square overall for the bishop. Of course, it was under attack by the queen on d5. So black here, he decides now is not a good time to lose a piece on h5, therefore bishop g6 chosen in the game. Now Magnus, from here, he's got most of his pieces mobilized. The only piece that's really not on a good square yet is perhaps the rook on the f1 square, but he decides, you know what, it's not that important, and he begins with the attack on b6. Queen to b5 is the idea, and again, very instructive, bringing out all of his pieces, and then once that happens, his next goal is to find targets to attack relentlessly. First it was the bishop and the knight on f6, then it's the pawn on d5, then it's b6. I mean, Magnus here just finding endless ways to pressure the opponent once everything is mobilized. And black here, how do you defend b6? I mean, the only idea might be, for example, knight to a7 or e7, but both those moves are very passive. Yes, they do defend b6, but the knight would be very, very passively placed, and it's just not a good idea in general. So what else can black do? Well, the computer gives rook to b8, rook to a8, pressuring a3, but to be honest, it's not easy to find a good move here for black. In the game, Grandmaster Kobian, he does play knight a7, defending with the queen, but again, the knight is just so passively placed here. Magnus, the move here is queen to d7, flying in with the queen, and now pressuring b7 while also guarding b5. And we're seeing, again, black is under so much pressure here. White's playing natural moves, but when you play the Catalan like Magnus, that's kind of all you need. You just need natural moves that apply pressure and put the opponent in difficult positions. All right, from here, black plays the move, bishop to f5, attacking the queen, but this move here does not defend b7, and Magnus, he just swoops in and takes the free pawn. Queen takes b7 is the move, winning the free pawn, attacking the knight, and again, black's under so much pressure here. He's now down 2 pawns. White has the better minor piece, better knight and bishop. I mean, this is just getting ugly here. Black, knight to b5 is the move, and Magnus here can kind of do whatever he wants. There are many ideas here. You can go, for example, e3, defending e2, you can go e4 even, you can go perhaps rook takes c8. There are a lot of ideas in the game. Magnus here, he does trade on c8. We have rook takes c8, Black takes back with the rook. Rook takes c8, and from here the move is g4. A very strong move which gains some space, pushes back the bishop. Right now that piece is on a very good square, so Magnus trying to force every single enemy piece back to a weak square. So g4 is the move, and now Black's got to find the right square for the bishop, and it's not so easy. Of course, the rook on c8 is under attack. If you go back to, say, g6, you lose the rook. For example, bishop g6, queen takes c8. Therefore, you don't want to do that. Instead, bishop e6 chosen in the game, the best square by far. But now, look at this. When you go back to e6, you hang the pawn on b6. That was the idea by Magnus. Of course, pushing back the bishop with g4, forcing b6 to fall to the queen. So g4, bishop b6, queen takes b6, winning yet another pawn. Magnus is just relentless. Of course, a3 does fall. Knight takes a3, chosen in the game right here. And from there, knight to d4, finally jumping in with that knight. And now we're finally seeing those last two minor pieces come to life in this game. They've been dormant on f3 and g2 the entire game so far. But now, with one simple move, knight d4, pressuring the bishop and also opening up the scope of this bishop, suddenly everything comes to life for Magnus. And we're going to see, given he has the pass pawn on b4, his entire idea now in this game is simply control the queenside and force this pawn down to the b8 square. That's all he has to do. It's so simple, but so strong. From here, Black, knight c4 is the idea, attacking the queen on b6, a solid move from Black, and White, queen to a7, sliding down to the 7th rank. Black, rook d8, pressuring d4 with the rook. From there, e3 defends that knight, and now Black here, he's under a lot of pressure. He's down 2 pawns, the E pawn and the B pawn. He knows if he just sits around and waits and does nothing, he's going to be completely annihilated by the goat. Therefore, he's got to find some way to get some kind of counterplay. So Akobian, to his credit, finds a very strong idea here. That is the move h5. I like this move, the alpha 0 attack, trying to force out a weakness, pressure g4, and so on. Now, the engine doesn't like this move very much. As you can see by the engine over here, the eval bar, it kind of skyrockets after h5. So not the strongest move, but I do like it. Black here has to find some way to get some kind of counterplay. Otherwise, again, you will be obliterated. Therefore, h5 is a good move in practice. But here, Magnus, he finds a simple way to just completely neutralize the idea. First of all, he takes on e6. We have knight takes, then queen takes, and then g takes. And despite having the ruined pawn structure, the pawns here are not that easy to win back in the near future. And beyond that, again, White's up 3 pawns here. The better minor piece, the pass pawn on b4, which threatens b5, b6, b7, b8 very fast. And what can Black do about it? Black tries knight e5. The idea being he needs some sort of counterplay against the white king. He's going to lose on the queen side. Therefore, his idea might be, for example, queen to f6, knight f3, rook d2, and so on. And it's a good idea in general, but Magnus here, he's just too far ahead in this Catalan Opening masterclass to be caught off guard. From here, b5 is the move, and we're seeing his idea come to fruition. All he has to do here is b6, b7, b8, promote the pawn, and win the game with the extra queen. Black, queen to f5, pressuring the weak pawns on the king's side, also pressuring f3 with the queen. From there, queen to e7 is the idea, flying in with the queen and potentially trying to defend on the king's side here with that queen. Black, rook d2, flying in, a strong move, again trying to apply some form of pressure and pressuring f2. And now the idea is, if White ever goes, for example, rook to b1, trying to support this pawn, you actually lose on the spot due to queen takes king h1, queen takes g2, and you checkmate the opponent. So Black here playing a little bit of a trap. It's a good idea, but again, the goat is just too good. He sees this, and he ignores the rook on f1 and simply plays the move b6. He's now 2 squares away from promoting, and that's going to be game over if he pulls it off. Black here jumps in, knight to f3 check, hits the king. White takes back, bishop takes, and then queen takes, but here b7 again comes all the same. The pawn is 1 square away from promoting. And again, the queenside pressure in this game, this is the name of the game when you play the Catalan. The entire goal of the Catalan is to apply relentless queenside pressure and just suffocate the opponent, sort of in the spirit of, let's say, an Anatoly Karpov, for example, or a modern-day Magnus, for, that matter. All right, black here, rook b2, trying to guard the b8 square indirectly via the x-ray defense. But Magnus, he spots the very simple elementary idea of queen to e8 first, check, hits the king. And after king to h7, simply b8, promoting to a queen. And in this position, all you can do is trade the rook for the queen. For example, rook takes, queen takes, but then you're literally down an entire rook plus 2 pawns. That is just too much. And for that reason, right here in this position, Grandmaster Jacobian, he's forced to resign, not forced, but he decides to resign on the spot to Magnus. So this just shows you the power of the Catalan opening after this position. Whether you achieve it via 1c4 or 1d4, doesn't matter. The Catalan is such a strong opening where no matter what you do, the plan is simple. Bishop g2, castles, and then long-term queenside pressure. And real fast, just so you know, the Catalan, again, via 1d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5. There are many move orders, but once you get here, black has a few main ideas. Let's cover them real fast to be thorough. The main moves for black here are bishop e7, bishop b4, c5, and d takes c4. Now, bishop e7 is the classical Catalan, the idea being black is trying to castle kingside, and then perhaps go d takes c4 or c5. The main line for white goes bishop g2, castles, d takes, queen c2, and from there, you simply try to regain the pawn on c4 very, very fast. If black goes a6, trying to go b5, you can go a4, stopping it. If black goes b5, trying to guard the pawn, you can either go a4, attacking b5, or even knight to e5, like Magnus did in his World Championship match versus the Russian Super GM Jan Nepomniachtchi on the discovered attack on the rook on the a8 square. Instead, if black goes, for example, d takes c4, the open Catalan, that line is very, very complicated. Black has so many ideas. In that case, you actually want to ignore the pawn on c4 for now and simply go bishop g2. And if almost anything black does, bishop e7, bishop b4, knight c6, a6, whatever it is, you pretty much try to castle fast and then regain the pawn on c4 somehow, some way. For example, if I don't know, one very trendy line for black is a6, castles, knight c6, tending b5. From there, you can go, for example, queen c2 or e3 and queen e2, or knight to, say, d2 or a3. There are a lot of ideas here, knight a3 and so on. But the idea being, again, you castle, then regain the pawn. Another very trendy line for black is d takes c4, bishop g2, c5, castles, knight c6. From there, you have two main ideas. One is the endgame. You can take on c5. The endgame goes d takes c5, queen takes, rook takes. For example, d takes, queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes, and it's about an even endgame. White does go knight bd2 and regains the pawn on c4, and white has a small edge here, and Pragnanda, my favorite online player, Pragnanda, the Indian superstar, recently won a very good game versus Arjun Erigaisi in this very line. It's very good for white, but overall black is relatively okay. You can also go, if you don't like endgames, right here, queen to a4, and regain the pawn on c4 like, like this, for example. And it's quite good for white as well. Now, beyond that, the line bishop b4 check is super, super trendy at the highest level. The idea being black goes bishop b4 check. The main line goes bishop d2. And then bishop e7. And from there, the main line goes bishop g2, castles, c6, queen c2. And white here has many, many ideas. Actually, Gukesh played this as white versus Ding Liren last year in the World Championship match. So it's a very good line for black and for white. White's ideas, perhaps either bishop to f4 and rook d1 and knight c3, knight e5, or maybe like some b3, bishop c3, knight bd2 action, or there are a lot of ideas for white, but overall it's a very flexible, good line for white. And finally, of course, there is the Tarrasch-style move c5, and from there, white's main line is to capture on d5 and c5 in some manner. For example, c takes, e takes, d takes, bishop takes. bishop g2, castles, and so on. And from there are two main ideas for white. There's the a3, b4 plan, which Magnus did in this game. It's very, very good. I like it a lot. It's very simple, very easy, very fun. There's also the bishop g5 plan, usually knight c3, bishop g5, pressuring the knights, pressuring d5, and so on. So either one works. I like the a3 line as Magnus played in this game, a3 and b4, like kind of like this, you know, something like, you know, this essentially in bishop b2, but either line does work. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. This should show you how strong the Catalan Opening is for white and why you might want to play it in your own online games. All right, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please smash that like button, comment down below your thoughts on this game and the Catalan Opening in general. And by the way, I do have an online chess community where I can show you how to reach 1,000 to 2,000 plus ELO very, very fast. Link is above, drmikechess.com, and down below in the pinned comment and the description. I'll see you there, and I'll see you in the next video.